Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Our phone number to call for the next hour is 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. I'm Paul Dottino, he's Matt Citak, and we're going to be talking Giants football for the next 60 minutes. Now, of course, if you've read our promos already up on Twitter, we have a guest coming on who covers the Penn State Nittany Lions. And in case you haven't done your draft homework yet, they got one guy in particular who's going to be at the top of the board. Obviously, medical questions, but we're going to try to dive into that. Also, coming up at 1 o'clock, we'll have a guest on from Texas A&M. They've got a couple of very interesting potential high draft choices as well. Not as high as the top three, but guys who are supposed to be really good.
Yeah, and all on the defensive line for Texas A&M.
Indeed.
Three intriguing prospects.
So that's our game plan for today. We'll talk Penn State first, maybe get a couple of phone calls in from you guys. Then we'll talk a little Texas A&M, and then the rest of the program will be all about you, our listeners and viewers. But for now, we head out to Penn State, and Zach Zako, host of the Locked On Nittany Lions digital network. He's been covering the program now for several years. Zach, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Hey, it's a privilege to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Well, my man, when we scheduled this interview, one of the things I said to you is you've got the opportunity to watch Abdul Carter for all 3 of his years at Penn State. Now, we know there's a medical check that's going to be going on this week, and I don't need you to be a doctor. But I think one of the things I want to do here, just to get this part of the conversation out of the way, from covering the team as you have, do you ever remember him having limps or having any type of foot maladies or leg maladies where you said to yourself, something's not right about him, that maybe he played through? Or maybe do you remember him missing practices as you go back into your memory banks and think about, yeah, there were weeks he wasn't practicing, but he played in the games? Because we're still trying to find out about this mysterious stress reaction in his foot that was discovered during the combine physical, and he says he has no idea what that's all about.
The short answer is no. He was present for all of the season up until the point where he had injured his shoulder, and that was going through the Fiesta Bowl against Boise State, and then he played through it. So the guy's tough as nails. He might have been dealing with bumps and bruises, but you wouldn't know. Even the most severe, and we say severe because of how we look at it, but Abdul Carter played a full game against Notre Dame with a championship berth on the line.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's any questions about his durability or can he handle injuries or anything like that, and he's playing through an alleged stress fracture, and we know about the upper body injury, we saw it. His shoulder was taped up, and he played arguably one of the best games of his career against the national runner-up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that kind of tells you everything you need to know about health, durability, stamina, toughness, that kind of thing.
Yes, so it's easy, obviously, to compare Abdul Carter to Micah Parsons. Seems like just about everyone is doing that, obviously, both coming from Penn State, edge rusher, number 11. So my question is, how would you say that Abdul Carter's game differs the most from Micah Parsons?
I don't think Micah would necessarily agree with me, but if I have to compare the two of them together, I think Micah is stronger. He'll usually have more of an aggressive bull rush where he can take on. I can't remember the 49ers tackle he threw, where he just took a 300-pound man and threw him. And it's not to say that Abdul Carter isn't strong, but he's more of a finesse. He can beat you with different other moves. It's his bend, it's his twitch. It's the speed and quickness, and that's where Micah would disagree with me. Well, I'm faster than Abdul, even though they're both from Penn State. They both wore the number 11, and there's mutual respect. But I think Carter's a more polished speed rusher and can use finesse moves, whereas Micah Parsons, I think, is the stronger of the two.
Well, let me have you pick Carter apart, because we all seem to believe he's going to be, if healthy, one of the top 3 choices in this draft. I mean, there seems to be a very strong consensus about that. Matt and I certainly believe that he and Hunter are 1 and 2, 2 and 1 at the top of this draft in terms of best players available. So let me ask you to pick him apart for a second, because I tried to do that as I watched tape, and I said, okay, he doesn't shed blocks maybe as well as you would like, and certainly in the run game sometimes, because maybe he doesn't read the run game properly, he does get caught. Other than that, it's pretty hard for me to find something that he is going to have to work on when he gets to the NFL because of the athleticism that you talked about, because of the speed. The pass rushing ability is going to overwhelmingly be how people are going to utilize him, and why not? Because he's very unique in terms of that ability.
Well, and that's just it. His overall game will make up for any shortcomings. It's difficult to be critical of a consensus top 3 selection, and I could argue that he's the number 1 overall pick, so there's not much to criticize and to say, well, he doesn't do this right or that right. He checks every single box, from on-field production to just off the field, what kind of teammate he is, work ethic, attitude, smarts, versatility. He was playing off-ball linebacker. He was a 4-3. He started on Penn State's defense as a true freshman. He was he earned right away. So this is what's so interesting about Abdul Carter, is that he wasn't an early enrollee freshman. He came in over the summer and impressed in such a short amount of time that he was there for the fall training camp for August. So he came in for summer workouts. And in that time, Penn State looked around and they're like, this guy's number 11. So he did that in a month as a true freshman 18-year-old. So that's the precedent that was set. And he was the starting linebacker right out of the gate, and then converted to defensive end. And that's okay. And that's the other interesting part, is he went from being the number 11 traditional, he's your off-ball linebacker, so he's in coverage, he's pressing the line of scrimmage, right. You can send him on blitzes and everything like that. But then they said, okay, we want you closer to the point of attack. We want you closer to the line of scrimmage. Can you be a hand in the dirt, defensive end for us? And he went from a position, he might have played it in specialty situations in high school, possibly, I can't remember from his tape, but he never played defensive end full time. And then we are talking about him as the top prospect in the NFL draft when he's been playing defensive end for 9 months? Less than a year? Mm-hmm. That, like I said, I don't have a lot of criticism about Abdul Carter. You need him to play safety. I'm sure he could learn. I'm sure he could learn safety, but that's just it. You play him at defensive end. If you say, hey, we need linebacker help, we're short on depth this week, you could move him back there, and he's great, phenomenal in pass coverage. I would say run defense is maybe his quote-unquote weakness, like you said. He can get caught. I made the comparison that, hey, Micah Parsons doesn't get pushed around as easily. He's right. Stronger. I think it's that overall strength. But Abdul Carter, I mean, he's 6'4", 250. He's bigger than Micah Parsons, technically, when you put them on the scale.
How much did he physically mature during the 3 years he was at Penn State? Could you see the difference in his physicality?
Yeah. I mean, he was already built like a Big Ten linebacker as it was, which is why he was number 11 right out of the gate to start his career. But you could see him. He's getting bigger and stronger and faster, and that when you add muscle, it might slow you down a little bit, but the weight and the speed complemented each other as opposed to taking away from his overall athleticism. Penn State just kind of does that. And Nicholas Singleton, for example, is a running back. I had to ask him. I said, "Did you put on weight?" He said, "No, I didn't add any extra weight." And it's like, well, you look bigger. You keep adding more muscle. So I think that's just a Penn State weight room and nutritional program that it is. Abdul Carter is certainly not the exception.
Yeah. So now I'm gonna turn the conversation over to the other likely top 10 pick. Of course, talking about tight end Tyler Warren. Honestly, looking at just about every part of Tyler Warren, he seems like one of, if not the most complete prospects in this entire draft. I mean, he has the size, the quickness, the production this past season. I mean, over 100 receptions, over 1,200 yards. So similar to Paul's last question about Abdul Carter, is there anything that Tyler Warren cannot do or you think needs to really improve on when he transitions to the NFL?
It's the same thing. It's that versatility goes a long way. I mean, in the highlight reel, he's snapping a football as the center and then running a streak down the field, and then in double, triple coverage makes a leaping grab, right? So it's the same thing that applies, the same standard that applies to Abdul Carter. Well, he could play defensive end and linebacker. I mean, Tyler Warren's the complete package at tight end. You line him up in the slot. You could, if you want to, you line him up in the boundary as a wide receiver. Yeah. Penn State lined him up at quarterback. He took direct snaps. He'd make throws. The quarterback draws. Warren's one of the most just intriguing, exciting prospects, if you will, because it's the same thing. It's the put your head down, go to work, the work ethic. He's a mismatch. If I had to make any sort of criticism, maybe he could be better as a run blocker, but he's still already he goes past the whistle, right, within reason. He doesn't commit fouls or anything like that. He works his reps. He plays all the way, through to the end. The guy was a battering ram and took so many lumps throughout the season. I'm surprised that he was able to stand upright and never had any injury issues, because it seemed like at times he was definitely 80% of Penn State's passing production.
Right.
But he was just, you always had to account for him. And even when teams would double and triple and devote game plans to him, the only team to really stop him or limit him was Ohio State, and they were the national championship team. So that's the caliber of Tyler Warren. If he reaches his peak in the NFL, that's where he just takes over games, and you can't take him away. You can only limit him.
Why do you think he was such a late bloomer?
Buried on the depth chart. I mean, we're talking New York Giants here. Theo Johnson was a veteran and ahead of him in terms of maturity at the time. So, an older, stronger Theo Johnson is going to be better than a Tyler Warren that was still developing. Warren didn't play tight end forever. If you compare Theo Johnson to Warren specifically, Johnson was always a wide receiver, tight end combo through high school and everything, and Warren was a quarterback converted to tight end. So Warren had to go through, everybody's timeline is different, and he found his niche being a tight end. So, but Penn State's had this long line of tight ends where you just kind of have to wait your turn. I mean, Brenton Strange was the second-round pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they were all in the same room. So you had to give reps to Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, and Tyler Warren at the same time. And the fact that Tyler Warren, as a true freshman, redshirt freshman, was already being used in Wildcat packages and this specialty player, despite two veteran tight ends being ahead of him on the depth chart, was really telling at the time when you look back on it.
Yeah, Tyler Warren is one of my favorite prospects in this entire draft. I mean, NFL.com has his player comparison as Jeremy Shockey, which of course has us a little excited about him. But I want to ask about two of the guys that actually had to face against Tyler Warren in practice every day, the two safeties that are going to get drafted at some point in the draft, Kevin Winston Jr. and Jalen Reed. I guess, what do you think are each of their strengths and weaknesses, and what really sets the two apart from each other?
Well, get us an update on Winston's ACL injury, though, first, before you even go to their skill set, because that's going to be a big deal for some of the medicals.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like KJ Winston's going to be ready for any sort of training camps or anything like that. It wasn't, so to my knowledge, there was a lot of, Penn State's James Franklin is very particular about how he discloses injuries and everything like that, because we didn't know. There was nothing on the record that said until late in the season that KJ Winston's not coming back. He's not available. It was always kind of this mum's the word. Okay, is he okay? Is he not? We kind of learned at the end of the day that it wasn't a full ACL tear. So I guess if you're an NFL franchise and you're trying to gather, there wasn't this total reconstructive repair on his knee, if you will. So he should be good to go. I don't think there's going to be any serious injury concerns. He rested, he healed, and went about it. It's a shame, because I think he would have been the difference maker in the defense that maybe could have gotten Penn State past. The difference of 3 points. KJ Winston, him being on the football field as a veteran playmaker, would have been the difference, because could have been all conference, could have been all American with a full season under his belt. Winston is he's basically a safety. He's a linebacker that masquerades as a safety.
Right.
So he's not afraid. He didn't register a missed tackle in his. I'm pretty sure, according to PFF, Pro Football Focus, for the entirety of his career. His junior season was cut short, but his sophomore season he played a full season, did not miss a tackle. The guy just has a knack for finding the ball carrier, making a hit. He's physical. He's got great vision. In coverage, coverage probably could be better, but just your traditional strong safety. He's not a free safety. He's a guy that you want to bring down to the box. Mm-hmm. He just has instinctive awareness when it comes to dissecting football plays, and the same thing can carry over to Jalen Reed. I think Jalen Reed, depending on where he goes, I think he is a second-round pick. If he goes in the third or the fourth, I don't think he'll slip past the fourth. I really don't. I see them both being day 2 picks. If you get either of these guys in the third round, you are getting the steals of the draft. These guys are at a minimum second round, early to mid-second round players in my mind. Jalen Reed is a little more versatile than K.J. Winston. I would say his coverage ability is a bit better. I would say he's a little bit faster. I would say K.J. Winston's the better tackler and the better in pursuit. But Reed's not far behind. Reed can play close to the line of scrimmage. He can play as a slot defensive back. He's just got he has a little more versatility as far as where you could use him. He could be a free safety. He could be a nickel corner. He could be a strong safety, whereas K.J. Winston, I pencil him in as, he's a strong safety because he's that additional hybrid linebacker, if you will, in a sense. He's a linebacker that can cover, whereas Jalen Reed's a safety that can go up and make a tackle. It's really impressive what Jalen Reed was able to put, because when K.J. Winston went down, Jalen Reed, they had to take him out of this hybrid nickel safety. They call it the lion in Penn State's defense, where he was basically a roamer, and he floats around on the defense, and they had to move him back to a traditional safety role. Mm-hmm. And that's where Penn State's defense missed out from being a good, maybe they're great defense to elite, like consensus top 3 last season, because they had to take Jalen Reed out of his prime role to accommodate the loss of K.J. Winston. And, thinking about it as a Penn State guy, it is a shame that we missed out on the peak prime of what that safety room could have given the defense had everybody been healthy. But that's Jalen Reed. You can play him anywhere at safety, spot, corner, you name it. He's the full package.
Zach, we got one more guy for you, and we can't talk to a Penn State guy without talking about a linebacker. After all, it is linebacker U, as we've known for many, many, many years. And Kobe King is your typical throwback inside linebacker, may not have the great length or the great athleticism and speed, but man, does he get his nose dirty in between the tackles.
Yeah, you described him perfectly. He's more of your traditional thumping linebacker. Took him time to really take over and settle into that Mike linebacker. But as he did, you could see the growth in real time. So that's what I like about Kobe King, is he not only gets better, he gets better in the off season, but you can see him get better in real time as well. I'd liken him to, gosh, I'm trying to think of a vintage. If your run stuff for Mike, middle linebacker that can command the defense, if there's a comparable through, giant.
You get a sense of a London Fletcher type, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair, because he's a tackling machine. I would say his weakness is in pass coverage. Against Notre Dame, this hadn't been exploited throughout the season, so there really wasn't a lot of book on it. But that's what separates good from great coaching, is that Marcus Freeman and Mike Dombrock. Gosh, I'm blanking on the offensive coordinator's name for Notre Dame. They exploited the fact that Kobe King wasn't the best in man-to-man pass coverage. So he's a 2-down linebacker. I'm not saying that he can't get better in pass coverage, but that's going to be glaring and needs some work in the time. But I see Kobe as as he gradually gets better and gets a little more experience. Could he be a solid starting linebacker for any team? Absolutely. I think it's more in a 2-down role. I don't know that until he shows me otherwise that he's a true 3-down linebacker that can handle pass coverage assignments.
Great stuff from Zach Zako, host of Locked On Nittany Lions. Zach, where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show. So it's Locked On Nittany Lions. It's available on YouTube, wherever you get anywhere that you get your podcast, posting daily episodes about Penn State football, wrestling, men's basketball, recruiting, you name it, every single day of the week.
I got a feeling we'll be talking to you about a certain quarterback this time next year, but we'll put that conversation off for about 12 months, okay?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to when it does happen in the future, so thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Be well.
Thank you.
The Penn State Nittany Lions first up on today's Big Blue Kickoff Live program. And understandably so, many, many good things to say about these handful of Penn State prospects who all were very productive for a very good team.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to have one top 10 pick in the draft, but they're about to have two. And, two guys probably in the top, 6 or 7 picks?
Could be.
Because Tyler Warren is not, I don't think he's dropping out of the top 10 and probably towards the middle part of the top 10. But yeah, I mean, and as Zach mentioned, like KJ Winston probably would have been, I don't know, early day 2, maybe even sneaking into the end of, probably would have been the top safety if he hadn't had the season-ending knee injury. Just a very solid group of prospects in this draft.
And Jalen Reed hits like a truck.
Yeah. I do think he's going to end up going probably in like the 4th round.
He'll go a little bit later. But coaches will like him because he hits.
100%. I think we're assuming he goes, let's say, late day 2 or early day 3, I think he will outplay his draft slot in the NFL.
That's probably true. All right, 201-939-4513. We've got a few minutes before our Texas A&M guest, so why don't we go to Jay in Phoenix and see if we can hit you up first on the program. Hello. Thanks for calling.
Hey, guys. Thank you. Just in line with that conversation you just had with the Penn State guys, when you look at Abdul Carter, and because I've watched, again, I'm only seeing highlights, so I don't get into it much more than that. What I see is a guy who it seems like every time he hits someone, it hurts a lot. I mean, there's always like a little extra, like he is a tough hitter. But based on his experience, so he comes into Penn State, looks like he played inside, off-ball linebacker first. Then he transitioned, like they were just talking, down to the line. Looking at the Giants' defense and the way it's made up right now, how do you guys see him being utilized? Well, with Shane Bowen.
Here's the thing. If you're going to have Thibodeau and Burns as your starters on the edge, and you're going to say that each one of those guys is going to take 25% of the plays off, right? Because let's face it, while those guys have been here, they have played an awful high number of snaps. Well, if you use Carter as one of the rotation guys in a 3-way set, that means he's going to get 25% of Tibbs' snaps. He's going to get 25% of Burns' snaps. And that means 50% of the snaps he's going to get on the field one way or the other. That's how you probably work him in as a rookie. And there might even be packages where you have all three of them on the field together at the same time.
Look, if the Giants end up drafting Abdul Carter at 3, and of course assuming he's fully healthy and ready to go for the start of the season, I think he's going to be on the field way more than 50% right away. I mean, you don't take a guy like him, number 3 overall, if you don't plan on playing him, very often right away. I think it is a good problem to have, having 3 very talented edge rushers, and it's going to be up to Shane Bowen to sort of figure out if it means moving one of those guys inside on some plays, or as Paul mentioned, rotating to give each of them a little bit of a breather, as we saw last year with all of the Giants' top pass rushers. Shane Bowen will find a way to get all those guys on the field and get them on the field often, more often than not. Like, that is not an issue. I think I've seen a lot of people, a lot of fans on Twitter kind of get concerned, being like, well, we already have Burns and Kayvon. What are we going to do with Abdul Carter? And all I have to say is just look at the 2 most recent Super Bowl championship teams of the Giants. Each of those teams had 3 very talented pass rushers, at least, if not more. So you draft Abdul Carter, you find ways to get him on the field with those other edge rushers and Dexter Lawrence, and all of a sudden you're looking at, in my opinion, one of the best defensive lines in the entire NFL.
Yeah, and that's great analysis, and I'm right there with you. I mean, the edge rushers, pass rushers, you can't have enough of them. I was just wondering as well, could you see him playing a little off-ball as well, maybe weak side?
Here's what I would do. If I had all 3 of them on the field together, and I do think there'll be occasion when that will happen, you use him as a rover because he has the ability to blitz through the A gap or the B gap. So what you do is, instead of necessarily having, let's say, Micah McFadden on the field with Okereke, as your 2 linebackers in your sub package, Maybe you put Abdul Carter. You put Abdul Carter in there with Okereke and say, okay, you're going to be in there with Okereke, and we can line you up anywhere we want to shoot any one of those gaps on a pass rush. There are multiple things you could do with him.
Yeah, I mean, his first two seasons at Penn State, he played full-time off-ball linebacker and was very good. Granted, this past year, his first year as an edge rusher, he was like absolutely dominant and a true breakout campaign. But the first two seasons, he was still very good lining up at off-ball linebacker. I mean, I think he was first or second team All Big Ten as a freshman and a sophomore. He won't
be a fish out of water. Let's just put it that way. If you want to put him on the field in one of those three sets with the other two fellas, he's not going to be out of place. He'll find something to do. Trust me.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
You got it.
Thank you.
201-939-4513. Another half hour left on the program. Do we have our next guest up, Pearson? Not quite yet. Okay, so let's try another phone call. Let's go to line 2. And if I can only find the name.
Jerome from Charlotte.
Let's have it, Jerome. You're next on the program. Hello.
Hey, guys. Love the show as always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got a couple quick questions. First, the comment about I love the off-season so far. I think Joe Shane has done a wonderful job getting the players and to agree to come in at a value deal for us. Commendable job. And also, I hear y'all talk about Carter, but I really want Graham more. And here's the reason why, because he not only will he help Dexter Lawrence more because they can't stop, it'll be hard to stop both of them, but he can relieve him. They can take more breaks. And have Dexter fresh going from each quarter than wearing him out, him being worn out.
Well, they play two different positions now. Okay, Mason Graham is going to be a 3-technique defensive tackle, and Dexter Lawrence is a nose. They don't play the same spot.
Not only that, but as you know, we've talked about on the show the last, month or two, this is a very talented and deep class at defensive tackle. You could take Abdul Carter at 3 and then still take a interior defensive lineman, whether it's 34, 65, even 99, and you're going to get a very talented player that at the very least could come in from the start of year one and at the very least be a productive rotational player. Hopefully, obviously, you hope that he develops into, a full-time starter next to Dexter Lawrence. But you can get a guy on day 2 that is going to come in and produce right away as well.
Okay, and I'm kind of biased about Evan Neal because my last name is Neal. Not that we're related. But I'm rooting hard for him. And have they have any report of him, any type of training that will make him better during the off season? I take that off the air. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jerome, for the phone call. Simply put, as Joe Shane said, they've already broached the topic of cross-training Neal to guard and said that was met with open arms. So he's going to do whatever he can to help the team. The fact that he's been healthy, fully healthy going into this offseason, I think it's a great benefit to him in whatever training process he's going through for whatever he winds up playing during the course of the season. All right, we go back to our guest line because now we're going to talk about Texas A&M, one of the other schools that has some very interesting defensive prospects, especially in the front seven. And we go to Andrew Monaco, who does the radio play-by-play for the Texas A&M football team. And Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Wonderful to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I guess we might as well start with the freak who's coming out of that roster, Shamar Stewart, 6'5", 281 pounds, length, athleticism. A lot of people say he reminds them of Jadeveon Clowney, who, of course, has had a very injury-riddled NFL career. We don't want to see Stewart have a whole bunch of injuries. But if you can, give us a sampling for what the folks in the NFL are going to get when they draft one Shamar Stewart?
It's funny that you say freak, and that's what he is at 6'5", and moved to that edge here at Texas A&M. What impresses me, a couple of things that impressed me about Shamar Stewart. He did not have his second season was not good at Texas A&M, and he kind of took that upon himself to make himself better. And I think with the Aggies bringing in Nick Scorton on one end and Cassius Howell as well, Shamar got to play that end a little bit more. And, I know the sack numbers aren't there for a lot of people because that's what they look at first for edge rushers, but he is a disruptor. And his tackles for loss, the consistency, I think, that's going to be what he's going to have to do next level. He's going to have to be more consistent. But I love the way this kid works. I got to give you the story that Mike Elko talks about, the men of the 10. So on an interception at Florida, Bryce Anderson with the pick six, he's going. The first man up the field blocking for him was the D lineman, Shamar Stewart. He was out racing Bryce Anderson. That's that freakishness. He is quick. He is fast. There have been some missed tackles, I think, in the South Carolina game, but he is just an impact guy, if you ask me, on that edge. And I love what he did. He was disappointed after, 2 seasons ago, and he did something about it as opposed to just saying, hey, I'm going to the league. And I think he made himself. I thought he, Scorton, and Howe were really good for the Aggies. I thought that defensive line was a strength for Mike Elko's crew this past season.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the lack of sack production throughout his 3 seasons at Texas A&M, because when you look at just about everything about him as a prospect, I mean, he has amazing size, amazing length. You can see the explosiveness when you just watch him on tape. But why do you think that his physical skill set did not lead to such great production numbers while at A&M?
Yeah, that's a great point because, and here's another thing to add to that, if it's a detraction of Shamar. Nick Scorton was the one who was getting double-teamed on that line. Shamar Turner as well on that line, and you would hope that Shamar Stewart. I think he's still learning how to be that edge rusher. Now, they moved him inside as well, very similar to DeMarvin Leal, who's now at Pittsburgh. A little inside, but mostly on that edge. And I think he's still learning, where I think Nick Scorton on the other end has the spin move and is more of a classic pass rusher, although the sizes are completely different. I think Shamar is still learning about that. And again, I would love to have seen him wrap up a little bit more. I think those sack totals would have been up. I'm thinking of a couple in the loss at South Carolina that he would have had. I think that is something that he is still learning with the old Terry Price, who passed away a couple of years ago, and Shamar kind of dedicated a little bit more to that. Elijah Robinson, who's now at Syracuse as the defensive coordinator, and with Coach Chaos, as they call him, Sean Spencer here, and then Jay Bateman and Mike Elko's defense. I think he was learning that. I think he was so athletic coming out of South Florida that he let that kind of dominate as he was a freshman. And then I think he had to learn that. And that's where I really think he's really grown. And I'm really excited. You can't teach that size and the athleticism, but you can teach that technique. So, yes, I understand what you're saying about the sacks, and I totally get it. But I think, with those tackles for losses, and I think if he's going to be able to learn that technique, man, I don't know if there's a better body that you would be teaching to be able to do that for what the Giants want to do. Now you just kind of program him, and I think he would fit in beautifully.
Well, let me follow up there. One final note on him before we go to Nick, and that is, with Stewart's incredibly unique skill set, as he makes the jump to the NFL, there's 3-4s, there's 4-3s. Are you playing end? Are you playing 3 technique inside? Where do you suppose, given the fact that he hasn't fully polished up all of his tools yet, he should wind up playing in the pros to maximize that potential?
Mostly a 4-man front for Texas A&M. Mike Elko has always played that 4-2-5, so he was that edge rusher there. And, because of that size, what's the key word that we've heard in the last couple of years, right? That bend and that edge, right? He's got that. Those edges are so much more athletic. And you see it, I'm trying to say that his growth is similar to, I know at different positions, but Edgerrin Cooper at linebacker for the Green Bay Packers, Edge was it was all athletics. but he kind of freelanced in the system, which got him in trouble a little bit. But then when he worked in, he realized where he fit in that system and how he had to have control. You could still have him on that edge. Again, slightly different players, but I think Shamar Stewart then sees that impact for him. 3 technique probably for him and him on that edge, and I would see 4 down linemen. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not saying he can't learn, but he's been so used to being with 4 down linemen as opposed to that 3-4, and I don't know if he could be that edge guy, that hybrid lineman-linebacker type position for Shamar Stewart.
All right, now let's move on to the other guy we've already mentioned, Nick Gordon. So NFL.com has his player comparison as Trey Hendrickson, which is obviously some very high praise. Looking at Gordon's stats from his final season at Purdue compared to his one season at Texas A&M, the tackles for loss were very, very similar, but his sack production was half as what it was his final season at Purdue. He had 10 sacks at Purdue, only 5 this past season at Texas A&M. What do you think led to that dip in production? Was it just, the often double teams that you mentioned earlier, or what was it?
Yeah. And you're going up against the Will Campbells of the world of LSU, right? the best tackle, and you add the tight end to Nick Gordon's line, right? You do that. Again, I thought he was so disruptive with the tackles for loss, and I just watch him, and he looks like that pure edge rusher and the different moves. An outstanding spin move is what he has, but he really uses his hands well. Again, very different size from Shamar Stewart. Nick is a lot thicker. The one thing, Walter Joliffe has been with us. He's been with the Cowboys, the Steelers, the Raiders. He's now with Texas A&M as one of our scouts, and I love talking with him. And he talked about the hands of Nick Gordon and how he uses them, as well as the feet and the bull rush. Like, I think he's got more technique than Shamar Stewart when it comes to pure pass rushing and that size. And then Nick, when he gets you, Nick, you're not going to escape from Nick Gordon. That's what I really, really like from him. But I think it was that attention, and you guys know that. I guess it's similar to basketball. When you go to the top of that scouting report, everything changes. So what are you going to add to your game? You can't be the same guy. But I think it was because a lot of the guys that he's going up against, the tackles in the SEC, I think was a little bit of a step up. Not a shot at the Big Ten at all, but I think a little bit of a step up. And you had to know where 11 was on the field at all times. Where Nick was, he was going to demand so much attention from opposing offenses.
Where do you think he made the biggest jump when he came over from Purdue as he developed his game?
Not his body, to tell you the truth. I think he changed his body, and I know he slimmed down a little bit more, and I think he added a little bit more quickness. I think it was bulk in the past. The other thing that really helped him here and got comfortable was he's from here. He's from Bryan, Texas. It's where he grew up, and then he went away because the size, and then what he did at Purdue was the attention. And I think he liked being that attention getter on that defensive line. I think he thrived with that. Some guys shrink from it. I think he thrived on it and said, yeah, bring it all to me. And there was a leadership on that D-line with him. Cassius Howe, who came from Bowling Green, was more outgoing than Nick Gordon, but you could see that line coming together. Stewart, Shamar Turner, Howe, Gordon. And I think his effect on these young guys, this next group for Mike Elko, the DJ Hickses and the Ryland Kennedys, I really think he really liked the leadership part. Now, he's going into a completely different role, right? When he goes next level, he's not.
No doubt.
Not that you can't be a leader when you're young, but you've got to. There's going to be the veterans, but I really think this is a guy who's flat out coachable. I love his relationship with Mike Elko. He wasn't afraid to wait. He brought that leadership to a team that, under a first-year head coach, I think was necessary for that defense.
Yes, you mentioned Shamar Turner, so let's wrap it up with the third talented defensive lineman from A&M in this draft. So Shamar Turner was used pretty much all over the defensive line throughout his time at A&M. Looking at his size, though, he measured in at 6'3", 290. That size, sort of, I guess, would be classified as a tweener between the interior and edge rusher. So given his size and his usage at Texas A&M, would you say that there was one spot on the line that got the most productivity out of him? And do you think that's where he should line up at the next level to get the most out of him?
He and Albert Regis were the tackles. And again, inside, outside, very DeMarvin Lealish. I remember asking Jimbo Fisher when he was here about that versatility, and he talks about it, offensive lineman and defensive lineman. You can only carry so many in the NFL, right? So that kind of versatility, but you got to stand out at something, right?
Yeah.
He added 30 pounds of muscle, but he never lost the speed that he always had, which I thought was impressive. But he was more in the interior for this line because bringing in Scorton on that edge and moving Shamar to the outside. But they rotated an awful lot of linemen because you can't just wear down that first four, if you will. He was more in the interior. What hurts sometimes Shamar is he gets so caught up in technique and the block that the eyes aren't there in the backfield, and he doesn't get wide enough, right, at times. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you, he is a load, I think, for offensive linemen. I really do. I think that strength really helped him. Now, if he can combine that strength with that speed and make those tackles, another guy who I thought was disruptive, and defensive tackles are so important for Mike Elko's defense. But I thought he was more inside this year, and when he was a younger player here at Texas A&M. And he thought about coming out last year, but that was the good thing about NIL, right? He could put himself in a better position with the year that he had come back. He was probably going to be a later round pick, moves to that inside. We'll see if that's going to be enough to intrigue one team to be able to pick him. But, again, very more of a quiet guy than a rah-rah guy, but I think he was one of the more dependable players while he was here at Texas A&M. And, whether it was Jimbo or Mike Elko in this defense, that D-line keys everything for the defense for the Aggies. And I thought Turner was a really, really good addition. I wish he was a little more of an impact because we were all excited about coming back. Mm-hmm. But I think when you talk about the teammates, they just rave about having Shamar Turner on that line. They just say he does so much. He's another one who's got to attract that attention.
Well, between the traits, the measurables, the versatility, it's easy to see why coaches would like him. I'm just a little curious. He was a 3-year starter. And in today's transfer portal world that we all talk about, where guys are hopping around and bouncing and bopping everywhere they feel like getting up in the morning, I just wonder about him being there for 3 years as a starter.
Yeah.
Do you think that was an advantage for him?
Yes. And again, the names that I mentioned, Terry Price, longtime D-line coach. There's a reason why Von Miller and Myles Garrett are in the NFL. Terry Price has that kind of effect. And Elijah Robinson, you know what? I still think even in 2025 college athletics, relationships still matter. And the other thing is, before Mike Elko went to Duke, he recruited these guys. Now, he didn't get to coach them, but he got to recruit them. So I think that really helps. But those relationships with the D-line coaches, with defensive coordinators, with Mike coming back, I think that mattered. And I think when you see some of these D linemen going to the NFL, you realize, okay, Texas A&M can get me to that next level. It was important. Again, for Shamar, I think he had to be talked out of going to the NFL early. But again, NIL keeps him. Here's what we want to do. You can craft your body, craft your technique to get you to that next level. Like, that's important. That's all part of the development in college. Now, there's so many guys coming in their minds, they're saying, hey, I'm going to be here 3 years and then I'm going to the league. Easier said than done when you're 17 years old and not realizing what it takes. But, yeah, I think those relationships that he had with guys like that, I think, was important. And he was a stalwart. And it wasn't just – he didn't come back and say, oh, I'll come back if I'm a starter. He said, I'll come back and compete for that job. That's the kind of stuff I like, because you guys know in this transfer portal, there's guys talking to teams saying, yeah, I'll take your money, but I also want to be a starter.
Sure.
That doesn't fly for a lot of teams. You've got to compete for that. I think that competition every week, I think that D-line made each other better because they competed among one another for those starting spots. And I give them credit. They had to go up against a good offensive line for Texas A&M. So it wasn't just what they were doing on Saturdays. It was what they were doing during the week as well.
Well, there's one thing I'm convinced about after having this conversation is that whoever takes any of these 3 defensive linemen from Texas A&M, they're going to get a good locker room guy and someone who's going to act like a pro and is going to be a very strong asset to that room. Andrew Monaco, the radio voice, play-by-play man for Texas A&M football. Thank you so much for your time. Great stuff today. Be well.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you so much.
Well, if you're looking for a stud up in your front seven on defense, Texas A&M is not a bad place to look.
Yeah, I would not be disappointed if, maybe pick 34, even 65 if one of them drops, one of these three. Because I think all three of them will be gone by the end of day 2. I don't see them dropping out of the third round. Where they land remains to be seen. Obviously, there are some questions about each of them. They're not like perfectly clean prospects. Otherwise, we'd be talking about them as top 10, top 15 picks. But each of them have their own, unique set of traits and skill sets that is definitely going to have a lot of NFL teams salivating the thought of adding them.
I wonder long term, Turner's going to be the last one drafted.
Yeah.
He might even slip to the third day. I don't know because his traits are just so good.
That's why I don't think
so he may not.
Far,
but he'll be the third guy drafted.
Yeah.
He may have the longest term career in the league.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Just because of his traits. And he may not make the biggest splash, but I think he's going to be a solid NFL player.
You can be very productive without ever having, those big splashy numbers.
No doubt.
You could have a very productive and long NFL career.
Absolutely. All right, 201-939-4513 is our phone number here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. And if we didn't tell you earlier, we are coming to you from the Giants Podcast Studio presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Pearson, if we have a second just to ask you about the huddle, any new programs going up there today?
Yes. Yesterday was Charles Davis. We also have a Her Playbook going up today with the new coach of the Golden State Valkyrie, the expansion WNBA team. And then later today we'll have a draft season on top 10 defensive prospects at each position.
So once again, plenty of stuff, constantly churning out new stuff on the Giants website, the Giants Huddle. We invite you to check that out when you get a chance after listening to Big Blue Kickoff Live. Okay, let's go back to the telephones. Jason in New Haven, you're next on the program. Hello.
Hey, what's up, Matt and Paul?
Good to talk to you.
Hey, Jason.
Good to talk to you, too, Paul. I wanted to just ask a question. I know you guys about to get offline, but Paul, you and John had a pretty interesting conversation. I listened yesterday into the show with the Colorado, the gentleman from Colorado, I forgot his name, that covered the team. But
Mike Pritchard, the former receiver who played in the NFL.
Yes.
He was terrific, wasn't he?
Yes, I do remember him. And you guys are doing a terrific job with interviewing all these guys from these colleges. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for your hard work, fellas. But I wanted to ask, and, you had a great conversation with John about what happens if, let's say Cam Ward, I forgot what the combo was, something like what happens at number 3 if, I think it was Abdul and Travis weren't there, or something along those lines.
I believe John's question to me was hypothetically, if Ward goes 1 to Tennessee and Hunter goes 2 to Cleveland, because he knows that I want Travis Hunter. So John likes to just stick a knife into my back all the time. He's constantly prodding me, trying to make me miserable. So he goes, so Travis Hunter's going to go to 2 and Cleveland, and you find out that the medicals aren't great on Abdul Carter, and you get a red flag from the medical staff on Abdul Carter. What are you doing at pick number 3? And I went to Mason Graham, which I know you're going to.
Well, I would first try to get either New England or Jacksonville to trade up.
See, I told John that, and he gave me a hard time. He wouldn't let me trade.
One team can flag a guy's medicals while another team's medical staff gives them the green light.
That's very true.
All the reports have said New England is gaga over, Hunter or Carter. So in that situation, I'm calling New England or Jacksonville and trying to get them to give me a couple of picks to move back 1 or 2 spots and then taking Mason Graham.
Now, what John presented to me to finish out that conversation, he presented to me, what are you hoping to get? And I know I've talked to a lot of people over the weekend. They're saying that nobody really wants to move up in this draft. It's going to be very hard to get the premier price that you want. I've always talked about the potential of moving down, but I want a premier price for it. And that pretty much means the team that wants to move up probably is going to want to go after Sanders. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be able to squeeze juice out of them to get a premier price.
Well, that I don't fully agree with. Just because in this draft, there are two players that seem to be on their own tier and then widely considered to be at least somewhat of a big drop-off to the next player.
But we're going under the assumption that Carter's got a physical ailment. That changes things.
Okay, you're saying the red flag, like across the league, everyone has red flags.
John said to me, if Carter's red flagged, that changes the whole conversation.
Yes, in that sense, yeah.
That's the point. If Carter's red flagged, he said, if you can't take him, if you hear he's going to need surgery and it's going to impact his career and you can't take him, what do you do? I said, well, I'd love to try to squeeze somebody, maybe the Patriots at 4 because they want Will Campbell. I'd love to move down a spot and squeeze a second-round pick out of him, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get it. So I'm just going to sit tight, and I'm taking Mason Graham.
Yeah, no, in that situation, I agree with you.
See, John gives me all these hypotheticals just to stick me. He's got this golden 24-karat gold fork, and he sticks it in my side during the program, trying to get me to have agita.
What would you do, Jason?
So, what would I do?
Yeah.
Given that scenario, what are you doing?
So, I called last week, and maybe Paul, I think I called last week when Paul and John were on the line, so maybe Paul won't, respond. Or you can, Paul, it's fine. I've been kind of, and I'll preface this, Matt and everybody, I'm going to be fine with whomever the Giants decide to take at 3. I'm a Giants fan before anything at the end of the day. So if it's Travis, Abdul, Shador, Mason, I'm rooting for those guys because if they transcend, the team transcends. So
what if they draft Pearson? Pearson's got eligibility for the draft. What if they draft Pearson? Are you okay with that?
Well, then get Pearson at the 3 tech and tell them let's go. So what I wanted to say, Matt, and I know Paul heard me, but so I'll talk. I know you heard me last week. So, Matt, my thing was, and none of us know at the end of the day. We all could be right with our picks. We all could be wrong.
Sure,
we've all
very
been
true.
high on players in the past, and it's burned us, and we've all been low on players in the past, and they turn out to be great players. So nobody really knows, like I always say. Me personally, I'm not trading down. I've been on the Shador train for the last few weeks. I think he's tailor fit for this organization, this franchise, and Dable's offense. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying he's going to be. We don't know what any of these players are going to be at the end of their career. That's why it makes it so interesting in the draft because we don't know. People progress differently. Me personally, taking Graham at 3 is kind of rich because this D-line, I don't think people realize how talented this defensive tackle class is.
Oh, it's really good.
I just don't see Shane. It's a hypothetical. I'm not saying he wouldn't. But, when you got guys like Wilson Nolan, and I'm turning a massive round too, but we just have a whole bunch. So my question, Matt and Paul, and this is not directed to you two individuals. I get off the line after this question. If the Giants and Shane and Dable, Mara, all those guys come to the agreement and they pound the table and Dable says, I want Sanders. This is the guy I need for my offense. I think he could be a top 10 quarterback in the league. Just for inference, just hear me out. I know we, as all fans, and I know you guys and TV columnists, sometimes we get into the part of what a player can't do, right? Well, they don't have a strong arm, or Mason Graham isn't a big, towering, defensive end, or Abdul Carter can't stop the run, right? We always pick on what players can do. Mm-hmm. Now, I remember listening to Shannon Sharp on his podcast saying, don't tell me what a player can't do. Tell me what he can do.
Right.
Right? Because we can always nitpick what a player can and can't do this, right? So let me ask you two questions. And just hear me out, just from my own edifice. So, if Shador is the pick, if he is the pick, and I know you guys probably wouldn't be highest on him, and that's fine. I'm sure you guys will still root for him. He's in a Giants jersey. Given some of the flaws, quote-unquote, people think he has, I want to ask you, too, if he's in Brian Dable's office, why do you think that would be a good match? Or what could he do in this offense that would help this offense to kind of keep going, get the ball rolling a little bit. Granted, with some of the weapons we have with Tyrone, I'm assuming in the draft they're going to take another lineman maybe to fortify that offensive line, maybe another running back, maybe another receiver. So what do you guys think outside of he doesn't have the howitzer arm, which, we know that's, I know it's a good to have. I think it's more of an icing on the cake kind of thing when you have a howitzer arm. I don't think it necessarily means you're going to be a terrific quarterback, because as we've seen, numerous quarterbacks had howitzer arms and they turned out to be just terrible quarterbacks.
Jason, I'm going to try to get Cliff in here before the end of the program, so we're going to answer your question and let you go. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, Jason. You want to take a shot?
Yeah. So, first of all, I'll just make this quick. I have said several times over the last few months that while me personally, I would have Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter at the top of my draft board, if the front office, if Brian Dable and the coaching staff, if they all agree that they think Shedeur Sanders is the guy that's going to lead this franchise for the next 10 plus years, and they think he's a good match for the offense, with no hesitation, you write his name on the card and you hand it in.
They have to take him.
If you have, and I've said this, if you have conviction about Shedeur, you do not think twice. I don't care how good Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter is. If you have that conviction, you make that pick and don't think twice about it. So, again, while my personal opinion would be I think I'd rather have Hunter or Carter, if that's the way that the front office and the coaching staff feel, I am 100% on board with that, because you can't hit a home run at the quarterback position unless you take some swings. And I don't think you should just swing aimlessly, but if you feel very good about a guy, then you take him at 3, and you don't risk wanting to trade back up into the first round later. Like, don't risk that. You pick him at 3 and you feel good about it. Period.
In short, Jerome, it's not about what he feels or what I feel or what John feels or anybody else feels. It's all about respecting the process. Every front office in the National Football League, if they have conviction, they're all in on a player, they have a responsibility to take that player, point blank. And I respect that. So if the Giants decided at number 3 to take Pearson Butler, I'd be all in on it, because that means they were all in on it. And I respect it. I may not like it. I don't think Pearson can play worth the crap. I don't even think he can pick a basketball team worth the crap.
Oh, yeah. It's all about the Knicks Celtics.
But having said that, I'd be all in support of the process, because you have to respect the process.
Yeah. Just to add on real quick, I'll say, we talk not too often anymore, but, every once in a while we bring up Hard Knocks. And the one thing that I would say that came out of that gave me confidence about this whole process is we saw what Brian Dable puts quarterback prospects through in order to see if, they have what it takes. So if Brian Dable goes through all those tests with Shedeur Sanders and comes out of it thinking Shedeur is our guy, I am 100% on board with taking Shedeur Sanders at 3 then.
Cliff in New York, you're last on the program. We're going to give you 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, guys. First off, about being rich at number 3 for Mason Graham. I asked a week or so ago, does Mason Graham, how does he rank in this extremely rich DT class? And the answer was he's in a class by himself.
Correct.
So if he's in a class by himself in this kind of draft class, that's a very special player. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, his position has a greater chance to impact the team than any receiver, corner, or edge rusher. And I was listening yesterday to Pritchard also, and when Schmelk asked him about Travis Hunter, Pritchard said that his best shot at contributing early and putting aside the other position for a while was starting out as receiver. So what would be rich is using a number 3 pick for a second receiver, assuming that Malik is still light years better. So I'm all in on Mason for 3 no matter what happens.
Well, that's certainly very interesting, and I appreciate the perspective, because we're certainly huge Mason Graham fans. I do think that if Carter gets a clean bill of health on his medicals, it's pretty tough to pass.
And the thing I'll just say about Travis Hunter is while, he might be better off starting as a wide receiver, I think whatever team drafts him is going to plan on using him in some capacity on both sides of the football. So that is where he adds more value than just coming in and potentially being your number 2 wide receiver. He's going to get some snaps, at least at cornerback as well. That's the value there.
I will read one thing to you very quickly. A veteran, long-time offensive lineman who played in this league, good friend of mine, knew him for a lot of years. He follows the Michigan Wolverines program with a fine-tooth comb. And I said to him about how high I am at Mason Graham, and I would be okay with taking him at 3. He'd be one of my options at 3. And he goes, great player, good hands and leverage. And I said, well, Mason reminds me of an angry pit bull, perpetual motion and disruptor. And he said, yes, exactly. Huge reason for the Wolverines' success. The guy is incredible. And that comes from somebody who played in this league for over a decade.
Yeah, I mean,
he knows.
I don't think Michigan doesn't win the national championship 2 years ago if not for Mason Graham.
Absolutely not. So, again, no fight for me. The Giants can't lose if they wind up with Hunter, Carter, or Graham. They cannot lose with any one of those 3 guys, as long as, again, Carter's healthy. You can't lose with any one of those 3 guys.
I would even add Shedeur in that category.
I don't feel that way, but you're entitled to.
If you're taking Shedeur, then obviously you have the conviction about him. And again, as I just said a few minutes ago, if you have conviction about a quarterback, you take the swing.
I respect the process. I don't necessarily agree with the evaluation of the player. Right. That's where the difference is. That'll do it for this edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, coming from the Giants Podcast Studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. As always, our show is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. We will be back tomorrow, and the idea is we're going to talk to somebody from Ole Miss to talk about some quarterback named Jackson Dart. So we invite you to tune in tomorrow, 12:30 p.m. live Eastern Time. And, of course, if you don't catch the show live, always catch it on the archive and all of your favorite podcast platforms everywhere. From Matt Citak, I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you next time.